What if everything we've ever been told about our place in the universe is completely wrong? You know, you look up at the night sky, and it's so easy to believe those stars are just destinations, just sitting there waiting for us to figure out the right fuel to reach them. But as we start piecing together the clues in this explainer, really looking deeply into humanity's most advanced propulsion concepts, an incredibly disturbing picture starts to emerge. What if our solar system isn't a launch pad at all? What if, instead, it's a perfectly engineered, absolutely inescapable prison? We always celebrate our spacecraft, right? We treat them as these ultimate triumphs of human ingenuity. Take Voyager 1, which launched way back in 1977. It's literally the most distant human-made object in existence, hurtling through the endless dark at roughly 61,000 kilometers per hour. Sounds amazing, right? Well, look a little closer at the reality of that achievement. Because in the grand cosmic mystery, Voyager isn't a triumph. It's actually a deeply unsettling clue. It reveals the mathematical wall of chemical propulsion. It shows us the absolute unbreakable limit of what fire can actually do. 73,000. I want you to really think about that number for a second. That is the number of years it would take Voyager 1, traveling at its current, blistering, mind-boggling speed, just to reach Alpha Centauri, our absolute closest neighboring star. 73,000 years. That number is not a rounding error. It establishes the brutal, undeniable certainty of our isolation. Our greatest, most advanced machines, they're barely even scratching the inside of our cage.
Part 1. The illusion of escape. Chemistry runs out. You see, despite the monumental, earth-shaking power of rockets like the Saturn V or the Parker Solar Probe, we're caught in this agonizing trap called the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation. Basically, it means the faster you want to go, the heavier your fuel makes you.
And the implications of that equation, they are terrifying. It means we will absolutely never burn our way to the stars using chemical rockets. They're just the first step of a journey where the second step hasn't even been invented yet. So, what if we abandon that illusion entirely? What if the only way to actually break out of this solar system requires us to unleash a forbidden fire?
Part 2. The Forbidden Fire. Engineering madness. What scientists discovered next honestly shocked everyone. Back in the late 1950s, the highly classified NERVA program out at Jackass Flats actually built working nuclear rocket engines. Real, functioning engines. But then, they were mysteriously canceled. And here's the crazy part. It wasn't because the physics failed. It was simply because the money stopped.
But the mystery gets even stranger. In 1958, physicist Freeman Dyson took nuclear propulsion to its absolute, most terrifying extreme with Project Orion. To put this in perspective, while our absolute best chemical rockets give us roughly 450 seconds of specific impulse, Orion offered up to 12,000. 12,000! The plan was literally to eject nuclear bombs out the back of the ship, absorb the blast with a massive steel pusher plate, and just ride these continuous nuclear shockwaves to reach 10% the speed of light. It's pure engineering madness.
Think about that. Humanity actually designed a ship fully capable of reaching another star. The math was completely solid. The tests actually worked. But then, in 1963, the Partial Test Ban Treaty made detonating nuclear weapons in space illegal. The law stopped the most audacious plan in human history, not the physics. We were literally left standing there, staring out into the void, knowing exactly how the engine worked, but legally forbidden from turning the key. Which forces us to look toward the ultimate, unharnessable fuel of the cosmos, antimatter. Discovered back in 1932 by Carl David Anderson, when antimatter touches ordinary matter, it annihilates with 100% efficiency. We're talking roughly 10 billion times more powerful than standard rocket fuel. But here is the agonizing twist. The universe is actually creating antimatter continuously, right now, in our upper atmosphere. Yet, as of 2024, humanity has managed to produce less than 1 billion of a gram. We know the fuel is out there. It exists, but we are completely, utterly unable to trap it.
It seems like every single time we try to carry our fuel with us, the universe punishes us, whether it's with impossible mass, politics, or just unbelievable scarcity. So, what if we don't carry any fuel at all? What if, instead, we use the void itself? Over breakfast in 1959, a physicist named Robert Bussard had a realization that would completely shatter interstellar theory forever. Space, he realized, isn't actually empty. Part 3. Using the void against itself. The drag of deep space. It turns out the interstellar medium is threaded with hydrogen, the exact fuel we would need for a fusion reactor. And Robert Bussard's proposed a genius way to just scoop it right up.
Bussard's concept, the ramjet, proposed this enormous electromagnetic funnel to scoop up that hydrogen, basically treating space as an infinite gas tank. But that's where reality begins to break down. To gather enough of that super sparse hydrogen to actually accelerate, that scoop would need a frontal collecting area of 10,000 square kilometers. We're talking about a funnel the size of a small country. And worse, the universe fights back. At those high speeds, the drag generated just by scooping the hydrogen actually exceeds the thrust produced by fusing it. The very engine designed to accelerate us forever acts as its own inescapable brake.
The ramjet basically proved how brutally difficult the interstellar medium really is. So in 2016, a heavily funded project called Breakthrough Starshot proposed cheating the fuel problem entirely. Their idea? Use a massive 100-gigawatt ground-based laser to push a microscopic, gram-scale probe attached to a sail, pushing it to 20% the speed of light. Journey time? Just 20 to 25 years. But the haunting reality of this plan? At those insane speeds, every single microscopic grain of interstellar dust becomes a devastating bullet. There's no armor you can build, there's no way to slow down.
It's maddening, right? We keep trying to build faster and faster ships, and the universe just keeps throwing up these invisible walls. The rocket equation, the drag of the void, the microscopic bullets of deep space. Honestly, it's almost as if we are deliberately not meant to leave, which forces us into a terrifying corner. What if the answer isn't an engineering solution to manipulate speed, but a sacrifice to manipulate time and humanity itself? Part 4, the generational sacrifice, born in the void. If we finally accept that we can only ever travel at a tiny fraction of light speed, we inevitably arrive at the generation ship. It's a solution that demands an immense level of psychological horror. You'd have to build a ship massive enough to sustain an entire civilization and accept the dark truth that the people who finally arrive will be descendants who have never, ever breathed Earth's air. And the biological math here is just brutal. Even at 1% the speed of light, Alpha Centauri is 420 years away. That requires at least 10,000 individuals just to maintain a healthy gene pool. At 0.1% of light speed, that's a 4,000-year journey. With human torpor studies showing viability for maybe a few weeks, we would literally be condemning thousands of generations to live and die in an artificial metal box for a mission they never even chose. We've looked at fire. We've looked at atoms, giant lasers, and even unthinkable generational sacrifice. And every single path leads to a dead end or a completely unacceptable cost. But this raises the biggest, most mind-bending question of all. What if we've been misunderstanding our cage this entire time? What if distance isn't actually a physical gap we are forced to cross, but simply an illusion? Part 5. Fracturing Space and Time, the Loophole. In 1994, theoretical physicist Miguel Alcubierre started searching through Einstein's equations of general relativity, actively looking for a hidden flaw buried deep within the math of the cosmos. What he found mathematically proved the existence of something called a warp bubble. You see, a warp drive doesn't actually move a ship through space. Instead, it contracts the spacetime in front of the ship and expands the spacetime behind it. The ship just sits there in a bubble of locally flat space, never actually moving locally, completely evading the universe's speed limit. For decades, scientists dismissed this because it required impossible exotic matter. But then, in 2023, a massive breakthrough proved that a subluminal warp drive is theoretically possible using only ordinary known physics. And that incredibly recent revelation unlocks an even older, much stranger clue. Way back in 1935, Albert Einstein and Nathan-Rosen published a tiny footnote, a mathematical artifact that they didn't even fully believe themselves. They described a literal bridge between two separate points in spacetime, a cosmic tunnel connecting two completely different galaxies as simply as a door connects two rooms in your house. They called it the Einstein-Rosen bridge, and for 50 long years it was completely dismissed as a mathematical ghost. But the way this theory escalates is honestly terrifying. In 1988, Carl Sagan and Kip Thorne mathematically proved that traversable wormholes are permitted by physics. Then, by 2013, physicists proposed that quantum entanglement, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, is actually a microscopic wormhole. And then, the true shocker. In 2022, Google's Sycamore quantum processor successfully simulated wormhole dynamics. The actual geometry of a wormhole was demonstrated in reality. Which brings us to the climactic twist of this explainer. Think about every rocket, every laser, every massive generation ship we've talked about today. They all share one fundamental fatal assumption, that distance is a physical obstacle. But the equations behind warp drives and wormholes, they tell us something entirely different. They tell us that distance is just a temporary illusion. It is merely a description of how space-time happens to be currently arranged. Literally every engine we ever built was trying to forcefully cross a distance that the universe's own mathematics allows us to simply fold in half. The fundamental mathematics of reality permit us to fold space, to step from one star to another as easily as walking through a living room door. Yet any attempt to physically travel that distance using speed is met with infinite mass, brutal radiation, and the agonizing limits of time. The cage we are in is not locked by distance, but by our own perception of it. So I want to leave you with this final, incredibly unsettling thought. If the universe fundamentally allows the distance between stars to be folded, why did it engineer the laws of physics to make crossing it physically impossible?